already.
Okay,
so
fantastic.
Are there any questions from the audience before we go to the Slido? And just a reminder to our participants by webcast to also use Slido to answer questions. I hope you are using it because I will receive them. So maybe while we're waiting, I think Dr. Diekma already answered this a little bit, but just about the cost of immunization in the United States. My understanding, it's a bit of a patchwork depending on coverage. Would one of you like to maybe just say a few words about how that works?
Do you want to talk about vaccines with children?
So in our state,
Or do you have
is this actually working? Can you hear me better now? Okay. In Washington, we are what's called a universal state. So we have a program, Vaccine for Children's, in the United States, which is a entitlement. It means that there are qualifications for the kids that are eligible for vaccines for children, or VFC vaccines. In Washington, we're one of, it used to be 7 states. I'm not sure if it is right now, but we're a universal state. So the way we're set up is vaccine is available to all kids under 18, or 18 and under. And so you don't have to have a separate refrigerator for the VFC doses and for the other doses. We've worked with insurance companies. We have programs set up so that vaccines are available to all kids and it's not separated out. But that's not true of every state. Some have only VFC vaccines, and then people have to pay for if they don't qualify for VFC.
And I think the issue that we can never really address at the public health level is we've effectively paid for the vaccines, but many providers can tack on an office visit charge or a administration fee. And you know, if you put yourself in the position of a single mom who's working as a waitress and making $5 an hour plus tips, she has trouble taking time off work to do this. If she has to drive to the office in Seattle traffic, she's burning gas. None of this is insubstantial. It's all costly, and it's. I really, we have sort of practical barriers, I think, to vaccinating kids in the schools, but there is a real virtue to doing it that way because parents don't have to take time off work and they don't have to pay the cost of getting to the doctor's office to do it. Those are all barriers that we need to think about how to reduce. You know, is there some way we can make this easier for families to get this done?
Thank you. Shavita?
This one's on. Okay, hi, I'm Shavita Paddy, Medical Health Officer at Fraser Health. That ethos of making vaccines as accessible as possible is one of our mottos at Fraser Health. And I'm just curious to learn what's going on in Washington State. In Fraser, we're starting to explore looking into different providers that are non-physician, non-nurse to increase accessibility. So we're starting slowly with pharmacists, but then eventually we'd like to explore midwives, naturopaths. So what's going on in Washington State to maybe make it a bit more accessible?
I like that approach. It's always mystified me a little bit that we actually let people get the flu vaccine in the pharmacy, but the other ones, no. Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, and we have more trouble getting people to get that annual flu vaccine than others, but that's one way of accomplishing a difficult task is you just put them out there where it's easy for people to get to them. They don't need to make an appointment with their busy provider. And you know, there are pediatricians in Seattle where you can't get an appointment for a month, and that can be a real barrier.
I will say that, is it still on? Okay.
Yeah.
We are, pharmacists are giving a broader range of vaccines now. Tdap, for example, and measles. During the measles outbreak in Clark County, I saw several pharmacies or grocery stores with pharmacies where they had a sign out front, you get your MMR here. So that's not aimed at the kids because we really want those vaccines to be given in a medical home, despite the fact that you can't get an appointment, but family practice or pediatrician. But once you reach 18, if you need a vaccine, we do have, we're working really closely with the Pharmacy Association. And we actually have a pharmacist on our vaccine advisory board for the state now who really facilitates a lot of that work.
Thank you. Juliet, I have a question for you. What would you think is the motivation behind movements like the anti-vaccine movement and the anti-fluoridation movement?
I think that in general, people are not well informed. And so they pick up a little bit online, and it might be their first understanding of vaccination or fluoridation, and so it leaves a bad first impression. But then there are these accelerators in the community who are, you know, I've shown you the data, the mental health data. There's also, I left out narcissism, which I think is a driver. And those people are, they are, as I said, the adjuvants. They keep it going, and they get benefit from it. Especially the narcissist personality benefits from having a following. And I've seen that in the fluoridation. In my respectful opinion, I think that some of the leaders in that community, it's driven from from New York State, the Fluoride Action Network. It's dysfunctional, but they have occupied the ground, and people haven't fought back as much as we should.
Thank you. I think this is for Douglas. Have any doctors supporting medical exemptions for children who don't qualify been challenged by the AMA regarding poor medical practice?
I know California has, there's a couple pediatricians in particular, that the local chapter of the AAP, which really doesn't have disciplinary power. There's been a move to at least not allow them to be part of the AAP, which isn't that big a penalty. But medical boards, I know there's a couple of California pediatricians who have been brought before the medical board precisely for fraudulent practice, that they're getting medical exemptions. And that's probably fair. I mean, it is fraudulent medical practice. When you're signing a form that says somebody actually has a medical contraindication, and they don't, that's fraudulent, and a professional shouldn't be doing that, even if you sympathize with those families. So I think that is not an inappropriate approach.
And he or she should lose his or her license.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a couple of questions regarding media, so I think I'll maybe combine them a bit. And, you know, what is the potential for the role of media in improving immunization coverage or immunization uptake and immunization acceptance? And then conversely, how does an organization, how do we as a public health community respond to or work with media that negatively puts out negative stories? And I think, Juliet, you had given us a good example of that. So just wondering, too, from the rest of the panel also.
So first, make friends with media. If you have children and you know one of the parents at your school is in media, that person should be a good friend, right? And it's instrumental to a certain extent, but it's also important for the community that you know these people and that you talk to them all the time, because when the nonsense hits the fan, you're going to need some allies. So you need to make friends with media, key media leaders. And you need to help them understand this concept, which many of them already have because they're professionals, of the notion of false balance, that you need a balance in the story. So you have the vaccine director of the Centers for Disease Control and the Public Health Agency on the one hand, and Joe who sits on his couch and reads Facebook, right? That's not balance. So it's important that when they say, well, we're going to get the other side of the story, you say, wait, just a minute, there is no other side. There is data, and this is the data, and if you're going to present a story, you have to present it with respect to the weight of the evidence. If we're 99.6% certain that the MMR vaccine is safe and effective, then that much percentage has to represent in the news story, the clip, or the print. And I think those are important things that you ought to advocate for.
Okay, anything else that either of you would like to add?
Well, it is, I mean, it's helpful to be good at it too. So, I mean, I think it's useful for people who are going to do media appearances, particularly on screen or on radio, to have a little media training, because there is an art to crafting a soundbite in a way that grabs an audience and grabs the media person. And you have to be, and when you're talking to print media, you have to be very careful about what you say, because I can't tell you how many 30 to 40-minute interviews I've done, and they have printed half a sentence out of context and make you sound like, you know, what you spent 40 minutes saying, it sounds like you almost said the opposite of that. And so there is it is a bit of an art form to get really good at this and being aware of the traps. And I've been well trained, fortunately, by my institution. But it is useful to sort of know how to do that. But you know what people like you in the audience can do if you don't want to go on the radio or that kind of thing. I mean, there's op-ed pieces in the local newspaper that can impact people. And many people are on social media now, and they have their own blogs, and they're tweeting. And I mean, all of that does influence people. And anybody can do it and be sort of a voice of reason in a sea of insanity.
And I'd just like to second that about having a media representative who's really competent. Dr. Alan Melnick, who's the health officer for Clark County, is one of those people, and he was masterful during that measles outbreak. I was down there in Clark County working for first 3 weeks of the outbreak, and when I'd go into his office, I was tripping over the BBC and CNN, and I mean, he was inundated, but he never said no. He never turned down an opportunity to get his point out about, you know, this outbreak is happening, but it's preventable.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, just one follow-up point. With respect to your role, of course you can write op-ed pieces, I agree, but you can be super spreaders of your knowledge, right? So you come in contact with 40 people in a day. You can talk, and I know you're afraid of speaking about, and of course it's appropriate not to reveal confidential information, but you have the opportunity to influence many, many people just in your day, just talking. And I do that with taxi drivers, waitresses. I say, oh, you're giving me water. You know there's no fluoride in this water. But I just think we have to do the opposite of what, you know, to counter what they're doing. It is, you have the opportunity, you have the knowledge and expertise, and I encourage you to use it in your daily life.
Thank you. One more question. Naomi, last final question.
Hi, I'm Naomi Chia, Ministry of Health Senior Policy Analyst. First of all, I'd like to thank you and tell you my admirations on the work you do and advocating for immunizations and all your wisdom today. My questions is, when I first started, I didn't know what's waxed, so I watched the movie Waxed, and the fear got to me, but I still came to work. And the next day I went to immunization clinic and got my flu vaccine because I know vaccine works and I've got it throughout my childhood. So I'm curious about if there are any strategies that you have in Washington State or in United States in combating this sort of strong anti-vaccination movement, especially with Vax 2 being played across the United States secretly. And what sort of advice for us here in the room in Canada to work together to combat this anti-vaccination movement? We have received a lot of letters, complaints from vaccine hesitant parents and Vaccine Choice Canada, etc. organizations when we implemented the vaccination status reporting regulation. So we would like to learn from you. Thanks.
May I just answer that just because somebody's unhappy doesn't mean you're not being effective. You know, you try to put a 2-year-old to bed and there's, you know, but it's the right thing to do. So I know governments are super sensitive to citizen dissatisfaction because they want to get reelected. But, you know, sometimes if you're getting a big reaction, it means you know you're on the right track.
Yeah, I would second that. You should, I think you have to wear a tough skin. And what I like about, there are other issues I sometimes talk about that I'm really kind of on the fence about, but I get asked to talk about them because I'm considered an expert. I love talking about vaccination because to me there's just no question. You know, I understand why people are hesitant and worried, but to me it's just so clearly the right thing to do that I don't care that the anti-vax crowd is going to hate me and send me nasty emails and letters and try to get me fired from my job. That's fine, you know, let them do it. And quite honestly, when I talk to newspaper reporters, if I get the sense they're going to write a story that is vaccine positive, I will tell them, you'll get hate mail for this. Just be aware of that because that's the way the anti-vaccine crowd works. They try to intimidate and they try to elicit fear and they try to spread misinformation, and you need to be aware of that. And the reporters are often a little bit surprised, but then I often will get an email a week or two later and saying, you were exactly right. This is exactly what happened. So just being prepared for it and being okay with it, because I totally agree with you. I mean, you know, one of the wonderful things I learned from my father in one of my early experiences with this kind of thing was, you know, he said to me, you're not doing your job if you're not on somebody's hit list. And he said, the key is you got to be on the right hit lists. You know you're doing the right thing, and then, you know, you should be on a hit list. And so we just have to understand that and be okay with it.
I think that's a great place to end. So we realize that we're standing between you and your lunch. So we do have a couple more draws, and while Monica's is arranging for or pulling the names, just a couple of comments first. I'd like to thank our morning presenters. And Dr. Diekma, I just wanted to let you know that there is a request here that I've gotten from 12 people so far that you challenge Jenny McCarthy to a vaccine debate. So I think we'll end there.
Yeah. Look forward to that.